Walmart loses sales crown to Amazon despite record revenues. Written by Gregory Meyer, published by the Financial Times. Walmart has lost its crown as the world's largest company by sales to Amazon despite reporting record annual revenues. The US retailer reported sales of $190.7 billion USD in its fourth quarter, up 5.6% year on year, bringing the total for the 12 months to January to $713.2 billion in a surge underpinned by its growing online business. Earlier this month, Amazon posted annual revenues of $716.9 billion for 2025. Walmart stock has more than doubled over the past 2 years, driving its market capitalization above $1 trillion USD, though shares were down 0.7% in afternoon trading on Thursday. The company recently shifted its listing to the tech-focused NASDAQ exchange as it sought to emphasize technology investments including automation and AI. Net sales are forecast to grow between 3.5 and 4.5%, slower than last year's pace of 4.7%. Walmart executives are, quote, overall constructive on the economy, end quote, said finance chief David Rainey. But there are certainly indicators out there, whether it be a hiring recession or maybe subdued consumer sentiment, student loan delinquencies, that would make you want to be more balanced, he said. Households earning less than $50,000 a year have felt stress, with some people living paycheck to paycheck, said John Furner, chief executive. Walmart continued to win market share among upper-income households earning more than $100,000, he added. Rainey said Walmart had typically raised its initial financial guidance over the past 3 years before surpassing it. Walmart forecast a 6 to 8% rise in adjusted operating profit this year. The earnings were the first under Furner, who took over this month from longtime boss Doug McMillon. Furner previously ran Walmart's sprawling U.S. business, whose same-store sales rose by 4.6% in the quarter, beating analyst estimates of a 4.2% increase, according to Visible Alpha. Consumers seeking a reprieve from inflation have sought out Walmart's low prices after sustained inflation. At Walmart US, grocery inflation of 0.6% was well below the national trend, and like-for-like grocery sales rose by mid-single digits on year. Walmart reported robust growth in online sales, which has attracted more affluent customers with swift home deliveries and a marketplace offering products from third-party sellers. Annual global e-commerce sales topped $150 billion USD for the first time after surging at 24% year-on-year in the final quarter. Operating profit rose 10.8% to $8.7 billion in the quarter to January 31st, slightly below estimates of $8.9 billion, according to analysts polled by Visible Alpha. A third of operating profits came from higher margin business such as fees for the Walmart Plus membership scheme and member-only Sam's Club chain, as well as advertising sold to suppliers. However, net income declined 19.4% to $4.2 billion, pulled down by changes in the fair value of certain investments. U.S. stocks fall as AI fears keep rumbling and oil prices climb. Written by Stan Cho, published by the Associated Press. New York. U.S. stocks are falling on Thursday while the oil prices rise with worries about a potential conflict between the United States and Iran. The S&P 500 slipped 0.5% and was heading towards its first loss in 4 days. The Dow Jones Industrial Average was down 365 points, or 0.7%, with an hour remaining in trading, and the Nasdaq Composite was 0.6% lower. Booking holdings dropped 7.4% for one of the market's sharper losses, even though the company behind the Booking.com, Priceline, and OpenTable brands reported a profit for the latest quarter that edged past analysts' expectations. Its stock has been under pressure because of worries that competitors powered by artificial intelligence could upend its industry and take away customers. Booking stock has lost roughly a quarter of its value so far this year already. Such worries have been rolling through Wall Street, hitting industries as far-flung as software and legal services and trucking services. Investors have been punishing stocks of companies seen as under threat by AI so suddenly and aggressively that analysts have likened it to a shoot first, ask questions later mentality. The doubts are hurting not just companies seen as under threat by AI, but also the private credit companies that have lent them money. Blue Owl Capital fell 7.4% to bring its loss for the year so far to 23.7%, for example. Apollo Global Management dropped 5.9%, and Ares Management sank 4.9%. Carvana sank 9.5%, even though the retailer reported a stronger profit for the latest quarter than analysts expected. Investors may have been paying more attention to how much profit the auto retailer made per vehicle sold, which was lower than expected. Walmart, meanwhile, pushed and pulled on the market after jumping to an early gain of 2.7% and then flipping to a loss. The retail giant delivered stronger results for the latest quarter than analysts expected, but it gave a profit forecast for the upcoming year that fell short of estimates. It was most recently down 0.5%. Helping to limit the market's losses was Deere, which jumped 12.5% after the machinery maker reported a higher profit than analysts expected. CEO John May said it's seeing a continued recovery in demand from construction and smaller agricultural customers, though its global large agricultural customers are still feeling pressure. Some of the bigger gains in the S&P 500 came from stocks of oil companies, which climbed with the price of crude. A barrel of benchmark U.S. crude rose 1.9% to $66.43, while Brent added 1.9% to $71.66 per barrel. Prices rose with worries about a possible military confrontation between the United States and Iran. President Donald Trump has been raising the pressure on Iran, which is home to some of the world's largest oil reserves, because of its disputed nuclear program. If a conflict were to break out, it could constrict the global flow of oil. Occidental Petroleum jumped 9.6% after it also reported a stronger profit for the latest quarter than analysts expected. In the bond market, Treasury yields held relatively steady after reports that the number of U.S. workers applying for unemployment benefits eased last week. That could be a signal that the pace of layoffs is slowing. A solid job market, in turn, could keep the Federal Reserve on hold for longer before it resumes its cuts to interest rates. Fed officials said that their last meeting that they want to see inflation fall further before they could support cutting rates further this year. If oil prices keep rising, that would push upward on inflation. The yield on the 10-year Treasury edged down to 4.07% from 4.09% later Wednesday. Other U.S. economic reports said that growth for manufacturing in the Mid-Atlantic region is accelerating, but potential homebuyers across the country didn't sign as many contracts in January to purchase. The U.S. trade deficit also widened in December by more than economists expected. In stock markets abroad, indexes fell in Europe following better performances in Asia. South Korea's Kospi jumped 3.1% as trading resumed following a Lunar New Year holiday. Markets in Hong Kong and Shanghai remain closed. Former South Korean President Yoon receives life sentence for imposing martial law. Published by the Associated Press. Seoul, South Korea. Former President Yoon Suk-yeol was sentenced to life in prison for his brief imposition of martial law in December 2024. Judge Ji Koi-yoon said he found Yoon guilty of rebellion for mobilizing military and police forces in an illegal attempt to seize the liberal-led National Assembly, arrest politicians, and establish unchecked power for a, quote, considerable time. Yoon is likely to appeal the verdict. A special prosecutor had demanded the death penalty for Yoon, saying his actions posed a threat to the country's democracy and deserved the most serious punishment available. But most analysts expect a life sentence since the poorly planned power grab did not result in casualties. South Korea has not executed a death row inmate since 1997 in what is widely seen as a de facto moratorium on capital punishment amid calls for its abolition. As Yoon arrived in court, hundreds of police officers watched closely as Yoon supporters rallied outside a judicial complex, their cries rising as the prison bus transporting him drove past. Yoon's critics gathered nearby, demanding the death penalty. The court was also convicted and sentenced several former military and police officials involved in enforcing Yoon's martial law decree, including ex-defense minister Kim Yong-hyun, who received a 30-year jail term for his central role in planning the measure and mobilizing the military. Yoon, a staunch conservative, has defended his martial law decree as necessary to stop liberals, whom he described as anti-state forces, from obstructing his agenda with their legislative majority. The decree lasted about 6 hours before being lifted after a quorum of lawmakers managed to break through a military blockade and unanimously voted to lift the measure. Yoon was suspended from office on December 14, 2024, after being impeached by lawmakers and was formally removed by the Constitutional Court in April 2025. He has been under arrest since last July while facing multiple criminal trials, with the rebellion charge carrying the most severe punishment. Last month, Yoon was sentenced to 5 years in prison for resisting arrest, fabricating the martial law proclamation, and sidestepping a legally mandated full cabinet meeting before declaring the measure. The Seoul Central Court has also convicted 2 of Yoon's cabinet members in other cases. That includes Prime Minister Han Duck-soo, who received a 23-year prison sentence for attempting to legitimize the decree by forcing it through a cabinet council meeting, falsifying records, and lying under oath. Han has appealed the verdict. 1,000 Kenyans were recruited to fight for Russia and Ukraine, intelligence report says, published by the Associated Press. Nairobi, Kenya. A new Kenyan intelligence report says that 1,000 Kenyans were recruited to fight for Russia and Ukraine after being misled with false promises of jobs in Russia before being sent to the front lines. The report was presented to Parliament on Wednesday by Parliamentary Leader Kimani Ichung'wah, who accused Russian embassy officials of colluding with work recruitment agencies to dupe Kenyans into believing they could be given skilled jobs in Russia. He said the Russian embassy officials issued them tourist visas. The Russian embassy in Kenya's capital, Nairobi, denied the allegations, saying in a statement Thursday that it never issued visas to anyone intending to travel to Russia to fight in Ukraine. It added, quote, "The Russian Federation does not preclude citizens of foreign countries from voluntarily enlisting in the armed forces," end quote. Ichung'wah told Parliament that said the National Intelligence Service report shows that 89 Kenyans were on the front line, 39 were hospitalized, 28 were missing in action, others had returned home, and at least 1 was confirmed dead. The report also provides details about the recruitment agencies that allegedly took Kenyans to Russia. He warned that any Kenyan officials working in the country's embassy in Moscow would be held responsible if they are found to have colluded in the scheme. Dozens of Kenyan families have in recent weeks urged the government to bring back loved ones stranded in Russia, with some allegedly forced to fight on the front lines and others held as prisoners of war in Ukraine. Kenyan recruits who have returned to the country have given accounts of being promised skilled jobs, such as electricians and plumbers. They say they signed contracts written in Russian and were sent to battle with little or no military training. Kenya's foreign ministry had previously acknowledged the problem and urged citizens to be careful. 2 recruiters were arrested last year and released on bail as they await trial. Why was Andrew Mountbatten Windsor arrested? Here's what to know about misconduct in public office. Written by Lauren Kent, published by CNN. London. Andrew Mountbatten Windsor's arrest on Thursday marks an extraordinary fall from grace for the former prince, and it all hinges on a notoriously difficult to prosecute law that experts have criticized for lacking clarity. Police arrested Mountbatten Windsor on suspicion of misconduct in public office, which is a common law offense in England, meaning it was established through prior court decisions rather than legislation. It dates back hundreds of years and carries a maximum sentence of life imprisonment. Later in the day, Andrew was pictured leaving the police station. Thames Valley Police said he was, quote, released under investigation. Police have not said what led them to arrest the former prince on suspicion of misconduct in public office, but he previously spent a decade as UK trade envoy starting in 2001. He stepped down in 2011 after coming under fire over his association with convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Under English law, the offense concerns serious willful abuse or neglect of the power or responsibilities of the public office held, according to the Crown Prosecution Service, the body that prosecutes criminal cases in England and Wales. The prosecution guidance sets out 4 elements required to secure a conviction for misconduct in public office. The person accused must be deemed a public officer, and there has to be a direct link between the misconduct and abuse of their responsibilities. The offense must also be willfully committed, meaning the official must be found to have been deliberately done something wrong, knowing it to be wrong, or with reckless indifference. Finally, it must be committed without reasonable excuse or justification. Legal experts say the offense is complicated and murky to prosecute. While Mountbatten Windsor's brother, King Charles, has sovereign immunity, making him exempt from criminal prosecution as well as civil lawsuits, there is nothing to prohibit legal action against the former prince or other members of the royal family. A report from the Law Commission, which advises the UK government on legal reforms, called it, quote, one of the most notoriously difficult offences to define in England and Wales, end quote. The current law is unsatisfactory, not least because it is punishable with up to a life sentence, the Law Commission report said in 2020. And in recent years, the definition of the offense has become a moving target. Quote, in the past 2 decades, a substantial body of case law has refined and in some cases shifted the terms of the offense. The report said, increased usage of the offense by police and prosecutors in recent decades has exacerbated the problem. Part of the issue is that there is no simple definition of a public officer in modern times, according to the Prosecution Service's guidance. It can encompass obvious elected officials, ministers, mayors, and members of parliament, but also civil servants, prison staff, army officers, police constables, and even bishops of the Church of English. The current law has also been used to prosecute secondary parties, such as journalists who allegedly encourage public office holders to leak confidential information, something that the Law Commission said has generated significant controversy. And following several high-profile cases, questions have been raised as to how well equipped the common law offense is to deal with modern forms of misconduct, the Law Commission said. The seriousness of the offense is also a factor in cases of misconduct in public office, and there is a high bar, according to the Institute for Government, a London-based think tank. Because of the ambiguities around the definition and scope of MIPO, misconduct in public office, and the difficulty of establishing all elements of the offense, police and prosecutors have tended to rely on other specific statutory offenses where available. Institute for Government experts have written, due to the lack of clarity, the UK government has introduced a bill, the Public Office Accountability Bill, to better define what is illegal for public office holders to do and to enshrine that in legislation. That bill has nearly made it through the House of Commons and will soon get passed to the House of Lords. If that bill becomes law, British prosecutors might decide not to continue pursuing cases open under the previous common law offense if they would not meet the requirements for the new legislative office. In short, there are a fair number of open questions in relation to the allegations against Mountbatten Windsor. Quote, allegations of this nature are serious and are likely to involve a complex and detailed criminal investigation, said legal expert Alan Maidment, a criminal law practitioner at MSB Solicitors in Liverpool. Quote, if charges were ultimately brought, the proceedings could take a significant period of time to progress through the Crown Court due to the evidential and legal issues often involved. It is important to note that misconduct in public office is a distinct legal offense and does not, by itself, encompass allegations of sexual offending, end quote. The former prince has not publicly responded to the latest allegations to emerge after the U.S. Department of Justice released millions of documents related to Epstein. Mountbatten Windsor has repeatedly denied all allegations of wrongdoing and said he never witnessed or suspected any of the behavior that Epstein was accused of. Mountbatten Windsor is not the only high-profile person in the UK under investigation for alleged misconduct in public office. About 2 weeks ago, British police searched 2 properties linked to Peter Mandelson, a veteran Labour Party politician who has been accused of passing on market-sensitive information that was of clear financial interest to Epstein in the wake of the 2008 financial crisis, when he was serving as Britain's business secretary. Mandelson had already been removed as Britain's ambassador to the U.S. in September following revelations regarding his personal relationship with the late sex offender. The U.S. Department of Justice's release of additional files in January heaped further scrutiny on his dealings with Epstein, this time in relation to his actions in government. Among the documents is an email exchange from 2009 in which Mandelson discussed Britain's plans to impose an additional tax on bankers' bonuses as a punitive, one-off measure following the crash. Separate to those investigations, UK police are also assessing information about private flights flown into and out of London's Stansted Airport following the publication of the millions of US DOJ documents related to Epstein. Stansted is referenced in more than 80 documents in the files released by the DOJ. Trump to decide whether to attack Iran in next 10 days. Oil prices rise. Written by Spencer Kimball, published by CNBC. President Donald Trump said Thursday that he will decide whether to launch military strikes against Iran in the next 10 days. So now we may have to take it a step further, or we may not, Trump said at the inaugural meeting of his Board of Peace. Maybe we're going to make a deal. You're going to be finding out over the next probably 10 days. U.S. crude oil prices rose $1.24, or 1.9%, to close at $66.43 per barrel. Global benchmark Brent gained $1.31, or 1.86%, to settle at $71.66. Quote, "It's proven to be over the years not easy to make a meaningful deal with Iran," end quote, the president said. "We have to make a meaningful deal, otherwise bad things happen." Oil prices have been moving higher this week on fears a U.S. attack on Iran is imminent. WTI is up more than 5% this week and nearly 16% so far this year. U.S. envoys Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner held talks with Iran on its nuclear program in Geneva this week. Vice President J.D. Vance said Tuesday that Iran did not address red lines set up by Trump during the talks. A major U.S. military buildup is underway in the Middle East. The USS Abraham Lincoln aircraft carrier is currently in the region. A second aircraft carrier, the USS Gerald Ford, is en route. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said Wednesday that are, quote, "many reasons and arguments that one can make for a strike against Iran," end quote. She said some progress was made during the talks in Geneva, but Iran and the U.S. are still very far apart on some issues. Iran's Revolutionary Guard held military exercises in the Straits of Hormuz this week. The strait is a key choke point for the global oil trade. Oil traders are worried that a war between the U.S. and Iran could disrupt crude flows through the strait.